Hey there, it's Ben from Return to Earth. I'm with my very reliable cadence of videos of whenever I can get around to it. You meet me here on a beautiful fall morning and we're going to talk about chicken eggs today. I wanted to introduce you guys to the gobblers there. It's almost Thanksgiving, so a couple of them are going to be on the plate. And then I've got Teddy here. Teddy found me. Man, what a noisy gang. Anyway, what are we doing today? We're going to talk about growing chicken eggs here in Ontario, Canada, where I'm at. And, is it worth it? Can you make any money? What sort of regulations we have to deal with here? Because there's a whole world of adventures trying to grow eggs in Canada. So come with me. We'll head into the racket house where I got the whiteboard, and we'll do this. Say bye, Teddy. Okay, so now we're in here. We can start talking about getting the nitty gritty. So, growing eggs in Ontario. What I wanted to talk about today is regulations. So that's basically the who, what, when, where, why, but specifically how and where when it comes to Ontario. My growing strategy, my expenses and my income. This is going to be from my 2023 year. It's going to change a bit this year, but those are the hard numbers I have from my tax receipts. My sales strategy, and is it worth it as a small farmer to sell eggs here in Ontario, or generally if you're anywhere in the world and you're stuck within similar constraints, this will have the same information that applies to you. So what are we going to talk about first? We're going to talk about regulations. There's a freaking giant plane going over. Okay, so we're going to talk about the regulation side of it. So I have some stuff ahead of time here. So what are we going to talk about? First of all, you can only have 100 laying hens. So I underlined laying for a reason. That's because a laying hen is a mature female chicken laying eggs, which means it does not include something like a pullet. So this is mature hens only. So if you were, let's say, bringing up new chickens to take over some ones that are getting too old for your property, you could have 30 pullets, which is basically a juvenile hen. You could have 30 pullets on site and you're not breaking the rules. Now, I haven't poured over all the legal documents, but as it usually is with this sort of municipal and governmental stuff, I'm sure somewhere there's a ruling, but it's impossible to find and it's buried in, a million stacks of paperwork. So that's my assumption based on my preliminary reading of the rules. I'm sure this also means if you have one hen that's 8 years old, because chickens can live quite a while, and runs around your house and you pet it on the head, I'm sure the chicken police don't show up and take it away. So that's what we're doing. We're having 100 laying hens at most. You can only sell at your farm gate, secondly. So what is your farm gate? Your farm gate is your property, the property where the eggs were grown. That's the only place you can sell them. That means no farmers markets. That means not taking them in a cooler to sell them at your son's soccer game or something like that. How would you go about selling off of your farm? So like for an example, let's say a farmer's market. In Ontario, that means you would have to do something called grading your eggs. What that is, it's from on high, a quality control system that they have in place. So what is essentially, it's a large, time-consuming, expensive process where all the eggs are sized, technically speaking, like objectively. So that's where you get your, small, large, extra large egg sizes. And they get candled, which you've probably heard of, where they put a light through the back of it and then you can see any imperfections in the shell, let's say, or if there's something going on with the yolk that's funny, like a partially formed fetus. That's where you would find that. So without getting the grading system done, why is that thing being so noisy? Okay, without getting the grading system done, you can't sell off your property, and it's time and expensive. So it's time expensive and money expensive. Okay, now that I fixed that banging, we were talking about grading. So this is where you find any imperfections, but it's extremely expensive and it's extremely time consuming. So if you're only having 100 hens, it doesn't really make sense. So just quickly, we're going to talk about where all these rules come from and what's going on. So the government has deputized something called the EFO, which is the Egg Farmers of Ontario, which is one of those, semi-private organizations that makes all the rules. In Ontario, they decided that you can only have 100 hens. This is compared to Alberta or other prairies and the Maritimes, where in some provinces you can have 300 laying hens. Amazing. So what is the EFO? It's related to number 4, which is quota. If you want to have more than 100 laying hens, you have to get into the quota system. So you have to go from 100 to like 5,000 or something. 5,000 is the number I seem to have been able to find. And guess who controls the EFO? The board of directors. It's a bunch of quota holders. Wow, I wonder why I can only have 100 hens. Without getting into a big libertarian rant here, that's what's going on with the regulations in Ontario. Okay, so my growing strategy. The sheep have found me. There's only a thin wall between us. My growing strategy, so I have pasture housing, which on another one of my videos you would have seen it. It looks like a small barn on a running gear. I have winter housing, which we're standing in it right now. It's like a 20 by 36-ish hoop house with double layer plastic on the top, and as you can see, the small clear walls semi-shaded. So these are some expenses you have to take into consideration. Do you want to do ready to lay versus raising from pullet? I've tried both now. So ready to lay is going to be about $20 per bird, usually more if you get a fancier breed. And then raising from a pullet will be something like 12 or 13, let's say 14, because you have to, of course, house them, heat them, give them feed for all of that time. And they don't come beak treated, and I don't know how else to say it, but a ready-to-lay chicken, when it arrives on your property, is essentially all of their instincts are, in the proper use of the word, retarded. So it doesn't know how to roost, it doesn't know how to peck at the ground, it doesn't know how to act in a group of, socialized chickens. So there's a bit of a learning curve. It's not like they just show up and everything's perfect. So they're laying eggs on the ground. They don't interact with your other chickens. You might find them trying to sleep in the middle of a field somewhere. So that's something to remember if you get ready to lay, is it's not just plug and play for that extra price. So that's something you have to take in consideration. I've done both, and I probably will continue to do both. I will probably get ready to lay if I'm getting a boring breed like a red sex link, right? So that's RSL, or a white leghorn. All my fancy breeds, I'll do raising from pullet, I imagine, moving forwards, or raising from day old, essentially. So what defenses do I have? So you would have seen them in some of my other videos. I have a guard goose named Gus, and he's been good for keeping the flock contained, helping keep them all in one spot. It's pretty helpful with raptors and other birds, except for he's only good, like my goose is only good to get to attack initially, and then he runs away like a big turkey. So that's something to keep in mind. And I have Gus the goose, and I have 2 roosters. One of them is really good for keeping my hens where they should be, and the other one is very, very attacky. So I've seen him go after a hawk, so that's good. So I have 2 roosters. So you have to imagine these guys are costing you in feed and time, even though you're not getting eggs from them. What type of feed do I feed them? I feed them partially conventional grain pellets and a little bit of non-GMO, but not because I'm only into non-GMO or organic, but because they really like it. So if you find like a mash or something that your chickens really like, I would stick with something that works good for your flock as opposed to being ideologically linked to one or the other. I would prefer to buy feed closer to my farm from places I know, but that is what it is. So I feed conventional grain mostly. But of course, my chickens are essentially free range. At any one time, they have 4 acres of pasture to go to, and they're always out exploring. So in the thing, they're eating mostly conventional grain. And what's some other things we need to think about? Well, you need to think about your water supply. I have a water supply that goes through my entire pasture from a water tower. So you have to think about things like water supply, bedding. I use hay that's getting old from last year, or wood chips. In the winter housing, I use a combination of hay and wood chips. And in the pasture hut, I'm using essentially hay. So that's the rough layout of what we're doing as far as the high level big picture. But let's talk about how we grow them on a day-to-day growing strategy from a financial point of view. Okay, so very briefly, here's an easy rundown of my growing strategy. So in an industrial setting, a hen will lay the best at 1 to 2 years, and then they either make it lay until it dies or they kill it. I'm not doing that, and I have heritage breeds. So my guys are laying best around 1.5 to 4 years. And I got to 100 hens by getting 30 hens per year about for 3 years, and that's how I got to 100. So now, moving forwards, I have 30 pullets coming in, 100 hens, 30 hens going out at the same time in the same year. And by going out, of course, euphemistically, we're talking, but they're going to the butcher to be turned into other things that you can value add for your farm. So at any one time, we have 100 hens producing, give or take, plus Gus, plus the roosters, and that's how we're gonna get to our feed expenses. So now we're gonna move on to our expenses, profits and loss, and all that sort of thing. Okay, so here's my very high-tech board of all of my costs and things. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna run through what the plan is and what my net actual was. So in 2023, I had 60 hens and I was carrying 40 pullets to maturity. So of course you have those expenses without getting the eggs. I'm selling my eggs for $6.50 a dozen Canadian shillings. My revenue was gross $3,400. Hello, turkeys. Then I have this other thing kind of aside, which is eggs for the house, something you can keep in mind. It's basically shrinkage from a business perspective, but we are getting a value out of it. Let's say there's an imperfection in the shell, or I cracked it by bumping into something, or I shook the bucket too hard. We'll just eat those. So that's about $250 of value we're getting here, me and my family, but it's not really something you can take into consideration. So it's not in my gross revenue, it's kind of off to the side, it's just something to consider. So let's go over to the expenses side. Losses. All of this, the costs about hens will be in ready-to-lay replacement value. So what this is my worst case scenario replacement cost for things. So my losses, I lost 10 hens, that's to predation and stuff. $200 in ready-to-lay replacement value. Now the sun goes away, I can take my sunglasses off. Feed, it is what it is, $1,600. But I was, of course, carrying those 40 pullets which were not laying eggs. Depreciation. I specifically put the hoop house here because of, depreciation isn't the right word, but I don't know how else to say it. It's a consumable because the roof here is double layer 6 mil poly. I did replacement cost at retail, so it's about $2,000 a sheet. 2 sheets, it's 10-year plastic. That's how I came up with $400 per year. That won't be reflected in my actual cost, but again, that's my worst case scenario replacement if that's what it comes to. Miscellaneous, I have valves, waters, stuff like that. You're always fixing things. $100 a year, let's say you got a brass fitting that explodes on you. And then 30 to 40 hens, $600 to $800. Again, ready to lay replacement value for a cheap chicken. That's a red sex link or something. So all of these numbers put together, so that's 200, 1,800, 2,200, 2,300, 3,100. Subtracted out of the gross revenue means that my net worst case will be $300. So that's worst. So that is not actually what I made. My net actual for 2023 was $740. So that's because these and these I replaced with day olds, so I raised them myself. There's a little bit of savings there, and I know that in 2023 I did not spend that on waters and stuff. I probably spent like $3 because I already had them. So that's more of a consumable rather than something we take into consideration over the long term. So this is both the plan and also what my net actual was for a whole year. And that's no labor cost. That is everything. That is going out to put them in every night, going out and letting them out every morning. That's collecting eggs every afternoon. That's picking up a dead chicken that got killed by a hawk. That's getting Gus to come back in after he ran away from the hawk. All of that is wrapped up in that $740. So of course, there's something a little bit to keep in mind, which is in this instance, again, I was carrying the 40 chickens that weren't laying eggs, but that is not gonna make this magically turn into 5,000 bucks. So that's sort of what you're staring down the barrel if you want to get into selling eggs and having laying hens. So next we're going to talk about what my sales strategies are and how they work out here on the farm. All right, so the conversion section is we're going to talk about the different customers that I get here at the stand, and that you can probably expect something broadly similar if you're trying to sell eggs on top of other items at your farm stand. You know, this isn't for the person who has 10 hens and they sell a dozen eggs a week. This is for someone who's thinking that they're going to make money selling eggs. So, okay, so the last thing is, should you do it? Well, first of all, as you could see from the money section, if you think you're just going to start growing eggs and get a whole bunch of free money, then just throw that out the window right now. That's not happening. First of all, if you're going to do this as a hobby and you want to get 10 chickens or 12 chickens, absolutely, I would say it's a lot of fun. Secondly, vertically integrating. So what I mean by this is you need to find other ways to gain value from having your hens and all the infrastructure that goes with it. So that means selling pullets, right? So you can get day-old chicks. You have all the infrastructure to raise them up. When they get to be a few weeks old, or well, I would say 8 weeks old, let's say, you can start selling them as pullets, make a little bit of your money back, get some cash flow. Another thing you can do is, and we have that around here, is a commercial kitchen. What this means is you can make something like a soup or a stew and sell it using your culled hens. So that's just a couple examples of ways that you can vertically integrate to gain value from having the laying hens on site. So not only does that mean that you can use the laying hens themselves in order to make soup with, but it also gives you more value to the customer when they come to visit to get eggs. Stacking. So what I mean by stacking is they're only one part of our farm. So the eggs only make one of, let's say they're only 10% of all the business that we do here. I have no idea if I spelled any of that right. I definitely missed an N, I think. So eggs only make 10% of the business here at the farm. So it's not like it's make or break on selling eggs and making money at selling eggs. So if you can vertically integrate and if you can stack, I would say that increases the qualitative value of having eggs on site. Lastly, value to customers. So if you can provide your customers with a lot of value for stopping and coming to your stand or your store or however it is you're doing it, I would say that definitely increases the qualitative reasons to have eggs. So let's say you do a CSA and it's a meat CSA or a produce CSA, you can include eggs in it so long as they come to purchase it from you. You're gonna have to wiggle around the billing thing a little bit, but if you're providing plenty of value to your customers, that's going to make sure that they become repeat good customers that buy a little bit of everything you make, then I would say it's worth it. So I can't make that decision for you, but you have to take all of this into consideration to see if it's worth it to make $700 for all your labor, but bring a new enterprise to your farm and increase the value and vertical integration on site. So, that's it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for checking it out. And that's just a little sneak peek as to what it looks like on the actual books of a small farm my size. Thanks for watching. Bye.